there guys, it's Shaqtech here, and I got a new laptop. Not a Mac. Hey there guys, it's Shaqtech here, and as you can see, I switched to a Windows system. Let's talk about the rationale behind this. So this here is my MacBook Pro 2015 13-inch that has lasted me since all the way throughout uni, and it still runs technically now, but you need to have it always plugged in. Storage is pretty much now overrun with system files, so it's getting quite hard to work on this laptop. It struggles with 4K video, which I'm trying to film more of right now. And yeah, you can't really, there's no smooth playback, there's no running and whatnot. I also have a Windows desktop here as well. That I would have made that Windows desktop back when I was in, like I say, back in high school. So yeah, like an over 8-year-old plus desktop as well, which was needing an upgrade as well. Working with 4K video, it doesn't scrub. Playing games as well, like games such as like Fortnite, whatnot, you have to play on the lowest settings to get a decent frame rate. So what ended up happening is I wanted a device that would replace both of my machines, so my Windows desktop and my old MacBook Pro. Now, there are a couple of factors that I've taken into consideration when going to this laptop. So what am I actually going to be doing with this laptop? So here are the main things I'm going to be doing with it. One, I'd be traveling around with it quite a bit. So most of the time I actually am not at my desk when I'm working. So either I'm out traveling somewhere and I need to bring a device with me to load videos and photos. I'm in another location. I'm working in another part of the room, or I'm doing a programming session at the office or whatnot. So a lot of the time I'm not at my desk. So the idea of building a desktop was ruled out quite early on because I needed it to be portable. Next is I'll be doing a lot of photo editing and video editing. Now those are quite two different things in terms of how much grunt you need in your device. So for photo editing, you can actually get by with something like maybe a MacBook Air, or you don't need a very high spec PC. You don't need to worry about GPUs, whatnot. A decent amount of RAM and a good CPU would get you there. Where it gets a bit more computer intensive is when you want to do video editing or any kind of visual effects, anything fancy with that. So that's where you need a decent GPU, where you want to really have a good CPU, a decent amount of RAM. GPU does help. That's more for like any visual effects, 3D modeling, that kind of stuff. Any kind of rendering work is where the GPU comes into play, but it's always nice to have a GPU in hand. I also do 3D modeling on the side. So when I mean 3D modeling, like drawing architectural models of buildings and whatnot, and rendering those. So that's where the GPU aspect also becomes a bit important. And then gaming. So I wouldn't say I'm a heavy gamer or an avid gamer, but I do like to play a couple of games on my desktop. As I mentioned, Fortnite is one of the things, and Call of Duty, whatnot. And I want to be able to play the games every now and then, and from the same device. Especially if I'm moving somewhere and this device is gonna be my sole setup. I'd like to play some games. Of course, you can play some games on a Mac. You know, I play City Skylines on there, and it runs okay. Play Minecraft, whatnot. But then there's quite a few games on my Steam library that you just need a Windows computer to play. And then the last thing is programming. So for those of you that don't know, I'm actually a software engineer. So my workspace is there. So I have a work laptop, which is a Mac, but I also do programming in my personal time as well, work with side projects and whatnot. And admittedly, it is quite nice to program on a MacBook Pro. That's why it's a choice of a lot of developers. Having a Unix subsystem allows you to easily do a lot of interactions with the terminal. You've got a lot of things built in, and it's just nice. All the dependencies and everything, it's just good to go out of the box. Now with a Windows system, it can get a little funky. Now I know Windows has released the WSL, Windows I think subsystem Linux, which I'm keen to try. I tried a little bit of it, so I'm using some PowerShell, whatnot, to run your commands that you can on a Linux computer. So I'm keen to try that out. I am not an iOS developer, so hence why I'm not necessarily tied down to a Mac. You do need an iOS, you need a macOS to program for iOS devices, but I am not an iOS developer, or don't think I am at the moment. So if I really want to do mobile dev, I have the Android IDE on this computer. Now, if for some reason I can't get around the WSL, my workaround that I'm thinking of is that I can just dual boot Ubuntu or Linux on the system, and then we should be good to go as well. It's kind of actually a good thing. I can separate my development work from like my leisure work, like gaming and multimedia and editing videos and whatnot. But hopefully I don't have to do this subsystem, because I do believe if I do a dual boot, I will be splitting the storage, so I need to allocate storage for both subsystems. I hope I don't have to do that. Laptops allow for easier modifications of it. So this laptop in particular has 2 free slots for SSD storage. It comes with 1 TB base, but it has 2 free slots of USB storage, and I can also add more RAM to this as well if I need it. Which is a really cool option as opposed to your Macs, which are now, I believe you can't actually change anything now in the internals without breaking warranty or breaking the piece of the laptop itself. So yeah, that's another issue with that Mac. And then the last thing is price and value for money. So I was looking for the specific spec of MacBook Pro that I was looking for with the M2 Pro, the 16-inch or the 14-inch. And it was coming around to the 4K to 4.6K mark. Now, at that mark, it gets a bit of a hard one to justify, because yeah, like it's a 4.6K, a 4.6 mark, but with the video editing that I'm doing, a 4K video, visual effects I'm not doing too much of, I feel like it's a bit overkill and a bit overpriced for what it is. Now, don't get me wrong, the Apple Silicon is amazing. Great performance, it can handle anything you throw at. But there's a couple of things I mentioned you can't really do. I think you're let down by the software and a little bit of compatibility issues. It's just something to keep in mind, as well as saying, of course, in the Windows system, there's that similar thing. And yeah, modifications are not there and whatnot. Now, specifically why I got this Windows laptop, so this is the Razer Blade 15. This is the 2022 edition. I didn't get the latest one. I will get to that in a minute. It's sporting a 370 Ti in it, an i7 1207 with a quad HD screen on it that goes at boasts a 240 Hertz refresh rate. So those frames are gonna look silky. It's got special audio. It's got base 16 gigs of RAM and 1 TB of SSD. Now I'm already planning on upgrading the RAM to maybe 32 gigabytes, which you can easily do in the back, and also possibly adding another SSD, because they can get quite full when you do a lot of video editing. In terms of build, it is an aluminum enclosure, just like the Macs. It's got 3 USB 3 ports, 2 USB-Cs, a Thunderbolt, full-size HDMI, SD card reader, headphone jack, and a 240 volt charger. So there's a lot of beef in this. Now I'm very interested to see this. So I specifically chose this when I came to choose the Windows laptop. Now this came in at around 3K New Zealand dollars, while the MacBook Pro you're looking at about 4.4, closer to 4K. Now the reason I went for the 370 Ti instead of the 460 that you could get on these models is, well, the 370 Ti is surprisingly benchmarked to be slightly better in frame rates and across games and editing, and in all other aspects is exactly the same. Now the other option as well I had was to go for the AMD 6 CPUs, the Ryzen 6 CPUs in here. Now the Intel Core i7 as well, again slightly benchmarked higher than those, and surprisingly battery performance was something that's better in this CPU. Previous gens of Ryzen's did have issues where battery was terrible, and heat. Now that's something I'm interested in seeing. Now this has the new improved heat sink design. I'm hoping the heating is much better in this. Apparently it is, but I'm interested to see how that is after some strenuous tasks. In terms of the portability, so I told you I needed to go traveling. It's probably going to be in my bag quite often and lugged around. It is an aluminum enclosure. It's around 2 kgs in weight. It's relatively thin. They boast as being one of the thinnest RTX laptops out there at the time when this came out. It's solid. It honestly feels very reminiscent, and kind of looks on the outside very reminiscent to the new MacBook Pros with that boxy style on it. Everything feels good. Keyboard feels good. Initial interaction with it is really good. So I'm looking forward to using it. That's been my video here. I switched to Windows. What operating system do you prefer? Chuck it down in the comments below. And as always, take care. One, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.